the same reality from a different perspective. And having several angles from which to look at reality gives you more tools to understand the world. And I think that in Western culture, there has been a strong tendency, in particular within the academic disciplines, towards a kind of monolithic approach to knowledge, as if rationalism was the only path. And I think we've put our own way of knowing on a kind of pedestal. All this work that I've been describing has been about putting indigenous systems of knowledge on the same ontological footing as science, and suspending disbelief, and saying, well, if we don't understand what these Indians are talking about, instead of saying it's not real, let's presuppose that what they're saying is real, and the problem is that we just don't understand it for the moment. And at that point, looking for common ground. Okay, thank you.
Anybody who has any questions to both Arno or Jeremy? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple of these. I have a couple of questions, please. So, one question: how do you explain? Or do you have a theory how did they find out about these plants in the first place? Because if they didn't find that, I mean, how do they know? But that's what you actually asked us, right? So, do you have any theory how did they get to that knowledge?
Yeah, well, any answer is going to be speculative, I think. As Arno was saying, it's not even known for how long people have been using ayahuasca, and there's speculation about that. However, if you ask the people themselves that question, they say, well, we use other plants, like datura, like tobacco, which are not complex combinations. And if you think about it, datura is actually a pretty crazy-making plant, and even the Shibaro will tell you this. They use it as an initiation, but if you use it too often, it just makes you crazy. So it would make sense that the question that in prehistoric times, people using datura would ask the spirit realm is, how can we get in contact with you by a safer means? So they say that their knowledge about plants comes from the realm of vision, and it was possible to get into that realm with other plants.
Yes, also like just to underline what Jeremy is saying. So I have some good connections in the south of Colombia, in the Sinaloa Valley, where the tree variety of datura, the Brigmansia, is used traditionally by shamans. But you see that, say, the last 20 years, like these Brigmansia shamans or these Stoa shamans actually prefer ayahuasca, because you always come back when you drink ayahuasca, and you don't always come back when you use this really, possibly dangerous datura.
Okay, I have interrelated two questions. The first is, do you think that there are no examples at all in Western civilization whole story of plant learning or natural learning? And if the answer is yes, if this can be related to the different botanical opportunities along weather. Speaking about Europe, especially.
What's the second part of the question?
If the answer is yes, I mean, if there are no examples at all, or very few examples of plant learning in Europe or in the Western civilization, can be this related to the different botanical gallery that we have and our weather?
See that fruit over there? If you eat that fruit and you get knowledge and the snake told me so. Remember that story?
Yeah.
Okay. So, such stories exist in Western culture. Genesis chapter 2.
That kind of approach. That kind of approach. Why it's so difficult for our culture to understand that approach? We didn't have.
That's another question, but are you willing to point?
Yes, well, let's start with Christianity, just like the snake in the garden. And then about the Inquisition. It has all to do with Inquisition. And so killing off all the people who were knowledgeable about plants about 500 years ago. And exactly the same attitude of Inquisition is still functioning. Like right now we have our war on drugs, and it's a modern variety of Inquisition, in fact. So what you have is that you have this really very well elimination, very well done elimination of knowledgeable people over maybe 150, 200 years, starting about with the Middle Ages here in Europe, and total disconnection with nature as a result of that.
Just a couple more things on that question. I consider it possible. It's always difficult to judge history, but if you look at it, it's true that you can wonder why it is that Western cultures have so separated themselves from these plants, from nature, this desire to dominate nature, put rivers in straight lines, intervene. This whole program and agenda that has come to fruition in the last 300 or 400 years through technology, and led to a world where everything is turned into a commodity. And we're sitting in it right now, and everybody in the room knows what I'm talking about. Well, perhaps that it was necessary to develop scientific, technological knowledge to go through that phase. And if you look at it in terms of, from a species perspective from above, say this took 2,000 years, that's 100 biological generations for a species to develop rational science and technology as we have it. It was perhaps necessary to go through that phase. Where we turn our back on nature and everything that happened. But now I think, okay, well, we've done that. We've developed the thing. It's almost like a birth. When you see a birth, there's blood, there's screaming. It's a difficult thing, and then it becomes a joyous thing a little bit later. And I think it's pretty clear that our species is a young species. Homo sapiens sapiens is maybe 200,000 years old. This is like 10,000 biological generations. So we're still an adolescent species. And if you look at the learning curve of our species, it's pretty remarkable. It's exponential. So ever so quickly, in a scene like that, we have developed this technological, scientific knowledge. But we've paid a price. We've separated ourselves from other cultures, from other species. We've squashed the feminine, and now we realize it. And that's the good news, is that we can actually use our intelligence to see the limits of our own system of knowledge, and we can, meanwhile, the shamanic cultures are still alive. So it's open to us now to be able to combine these things. And actually, I think that combining these different forms of knowledge is about the survival of our species.
Yes, regarding the realm that you visit during your ayahuasca visions, would you say that this is something that happens strictly on the mind, or